Hello, everybody, and welcome to our event. I'll let Dr. Collinsworth kind of start us off here.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Alpha Beta Ada's first resume and CV writing workshop. My name's Jessica Collinsworth, and I'm the newly elected president of Alpha Beta Ada, which is United States University's chapter of Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nurses. I'm very proud to introduce and welcome our amazing speaker, Logann Todd. Logann is the Career and Alumni Services Manager here at United States University. She supports our students and alumni communities with career-related activities, including job searching, networking, interviewing, and much more. She is a certified career services practitioner and a global career facilitator and has worked in the career services space for the past 8 to 10 years, supporting job seekers as they pursue careers that they enjoy and find fulfillment in. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Logann Todd, Career and Alumni Services Manager.
Thank you, Dr. Collinsworth. We are going to jump right in here. So if this is your first time interacting with Career and Alumni Services, like Dr. Collinsworth said, I'm Logann. I'm the Career and Alumni Services Manager here at USU. My job is really to help support you in terms of career development while you're in school, but also after you graduate and what those next steps might be for you. Of course, today we're just going to be talking about resumes and CVs, but I can also help you with a lot of other things. One thing that I can assist you with that's not listed here too is planning for what's next. So what does that look like in terms of your licensure process, licensure options too? There's lots of different things that you can pursue, so kind of helping you figure out where that perfect fit might be. You can schedule an appointment with me anytime through Calendly, and I'll make sure that this link is sent to you in a follow-up email so that you can schedule. So Dr. Collinsworth already kind of introduced us to Sigma, and so most of you probably are already affiliated with the association, but if not, Sigma is an internationally recognized nursing honor society. And so really helping you promote your leadership skills, enhance your commitment to the field. But what does it really mean to you? What does it really say about you when you're a part of Sigma? And so you're really dedicated to that next level of nursing profession. Your leadership, your scholarship, your service, it is a big deal. So you should really celebrate that. And today we're going to be talking about how you can add this to your resume, but also if you have a LinkedIn profile or some type of portfolio, you can also apply this information there. So why does this matter to employers? So when an employer is looking at two candidates and one of them is a part of Sigma, one of them doesn't have it on their resume or maybe isn't a participant, what they're looking at is your demonstrative achievement academically. So you're kind of the upper edge compared to that other candidate. Your leadership potential as well, right? You have to qualify to be a part of Sigma. There are certain qualifications in order to be accepted into the organization. So it's not just a free-for-all, anybody can join. It's really comes with a higher rigor. And like I said, not all candidates have an honor society or a part of one. So when you do, it really does set you apart in that candidate pool. And I'm going to show you how to emphasize your skills and experience in Sigma on your documents. So some quick facts here. So we're just you're welcome to participate, put your answers in the chat, or if you don't want to put them in the chat, you can kind of think to yourself. But how long do you think an employer or a recruiter spends looking at your resume to determine if they want to move on in the hiring process? So what amount of time? You can put your guesses in that chat box if you want. All right, Dr. Chi says 2 minutes. Any other guesses? So how long do they spend looking at your resume to move forward?
Michelle, you can go ahead and unmute if you. Like she has her hand raised, but her mic is muted. Michelle, you could just type it in if you wanted to too.
Yes. All right, Michelle says 3. All right, so the correct answer is actually only 7 to 8 seconds, which is a very, very short amount of time. But this is telling us it's even more important that we need to have the most important information on our document for them to pick up within that amount of time. So similarly, what percentage of resumes submitted are actually rejected because they have a photo or image on their document? So looking for a percentage here. Any guesses? %90. That's a good guess. So the correct answer is really close, 88%. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about applicant tracking systems. And unfortunately, photos and images are kind of a pain point when it comes to those ATS because it will trigger something in the system and automatically reject you. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to bypass that. All right, third one here. What percentage of applicants actually move on to an interview? So they pass that 7 to 8 second scan, they get through the applicant tracking system. Which percent of applicants actually move on to the interview phase? Michelle says 10. Dr. C says 5%. So it's 2 to 3. So out of 100 applicants, really only 2 or 3 move on to the interview phase. Now, of course, it really depends on the role, right? If they're hiring for multiple, then that number is going to go up, but it's about 2 to 3%. So your goal is to pass that 7 to 8 second scan, make sure you have a solid resume to get through the applicant tracking system, and hopefully be one of those 2 to 3 candidates to get an interview. Now, what are those top 3 mistakes applicants make? I kind of gave you one by including photos or images, but any other guesses on big mistakes in applications?
Maybe not including pertinent information like their titles or credentials.
Right. Yep. Definitely one of them. Any other guesses here? All right. So number 1 is grammar and spelling errors, which are very easy to make, but hard to pick up because we spend so long looking at our document, putting things together that we miss those things. So the good news is that there's lots of tools out there now where you do have the ability to kind of put them through a scanner and pick up those grammar and spelling errors. Another thing is your unprofessional email address and contact info. So I've seen many resumes where someone has a personal email listed on there that's just a little silly. What I mean by silly is, um, for example, it'll say like Joe Smith soccer player at gmail.com or something. Joe, I love that you love soccer, but does that really apply to nursing? Not really, right? So we want to make sure we have a good, solid professional email address that we're using for job searching and to double check that that email is listed on our important documents. Same with contact information. You submit this beautiful resume in your application, and then the employer has no way to contact you because you didn't put the proper contact information in there. And the third one, like Dr. C said, putting your relevant information, not tailoring your document to the job. We want to make sure we have important, relevant, up-to-date information in there that's hitting the ATS the correct way so we get through, get an interview. So thanks for playing along. Hopefully you learned some new things. When we look at the modern day application process, especially now given a post-COVID world, it's a little crazy. And so most candidates will go to Indeed or ZipRecruiter and apply online, right? What you don't know is that your application is actually being scanned through what's called an applicant tracking system, or the ATS. You can think of it like a robot that's scanning your resume and trying to pick up keywords and specific qualifications that give you a score of sorts. So this is actually where majority of candidates fail because they don't know how to meet the ATS criteria. Then hopefully we get through, we're one of those 2 to 3% or 2 to 3 candidates that go on to an interview. And then eventually you're that final one, you have an interview and an offer. So we're going to spend some time looking at this ATS. These two screenshots here are examples of what an applicant tracking system would look like from an employer side. So depending on the system that they're using, it might look a little bit different. But ultimately, it'll have your name and contact information if they have that in the system or it pulled it from your resume. And it will give you some type of ranking. So in this example, you can see the rank is set in a percentage, where this one is more of a grade. And this one has a little bit more sophisticated skill matching. So really it picked up your skills in your resume and it kind of gave you a grade based on that. It will show the date that you applied or the date you were added to the system. And usually it'll have some type of attachment or attachments depending on what you uploaded. This is easy for the employer to see on their side, right? Because they can just pull the top candidates based on those rankings. Your goal as a candidate is to be one of those top achievers in the candidate pool. However, we don't want to be an A++ or 100% because that means we copied and pasted the job description. What we do want to aim for is somewhere around the top 80 to 90%. You can do this by using keywords from the job description. So not copying and pasting, but really analyzing that job description to pick up the keywords. Using standard section headers also help the robot scan that document. So thinking like education section, relevant experience, leadership experience, right? These are very easy for a human to acknowledge, but it's much easier for that ATS to pick up as well. I have in big bold letters here, do not use resume templates you find online. There are so many of them out there, and unfortunately, not all of them are helpful. A lot of them have pre-built formatting that is really tough to get around, and it can make it challenging for the ATS to read your document. And those can include images and graphics, fancy tables, headers, and footers in your document. And even further, as we just talked about on the previous couple previous slides ago, is that the ATS will actually reject your application if that is the case. So just some tips there. Your goal is not to be 100 or an A++. Your goal is to be a good candidate in somewhere around that 80 to 90% or an A or a B+. So here's some examples. I actually went on Google and typed in nursing resume templates, and these were 3 examples that popped up. We're going to talk about why these are bad. So this first one, it looks really cool and it's colorful, but unfortunately the ATS can't read this, right? We have an image in here, we have some different formatting. The big thing is the columns. So to a human eye, right, we can look at this and we can read this document and see that it has 2 columns and we can read the information. But how an ATS reads a document is from left to right. So this information up here, it will be able to read properly, but when it gets down here, it's going to read work experience, skills, and competencies, advanced practice registered nurse, compassion, ethics, emotional intelligence, and it's going to have a really hard time picking up those keywords in your relevant experience because it's all jumbled together. Another thing to think about too is if we do include colors, if an employer were to print them out and they're using some funky type of computer with some strange printing capabilities, your colors might not show up the same way that you see them. We have some white text over a red background. That's a good example that they might not be able to see these if they print it on their end. And then we have those icons, some different colors in here. It could throw the ATS off and we could get rejected. So moving on to this second one, we have the column structure again. We have a lot of images in here. This one will probably get rejected right away. And then also it's lacking some experience. So in this travel work experience section, you can see here that it has the name of the position, the place that they worked, but there's no bullet points explaining what they've done. And so when the ATS is trying to do the keyword match, it's going to have a hard time giving you a high score because you don't have the content it's looking for. This third example isn't too bad. We can read this. The ATS can read it left to right, no problems there. But the formatting restricts the full use of the page. There's a lot of white space. We don't want to overload it with text, but we want to be somewhere in that sweet spot. And this one really is lacking a lot of content. So very minimal experience is presented here. The employer is going to have a hard time kind of assessing your candidacy. And we have some images here, so this one's going to get thrown in. Good news is that there are good templates out there. We'll get to it on the next slide. Google Docs also has some templates. Microsoft Word has templates. They might look something like this if you're familiar. These are all similar notes on that last slide. So we have columns here. This third one's not too bad, but there is some weird formatting that I've played around with that can make it tough for the ATS to read. So just to note that Google Docs and Microsoft Word are not safe for template use. So we talked about column structure, not enough content, right? There's still a lot of white space on here. And the formatting is also really tough for you to reset. So if you liked the colors and the font choices and you wanted to play around with it to make it good for ATS, it would be a little bit of a challenge. But if you are on Google and you do a search for resumes and something like these come up, you hit the buzzer, you found the right ones to use, you're ready to go. So I always say stick with a black and white resume. It's the best thing you can do. You can add a little color here and there with your font choices, but for the most part, we want to look for something like these three. The one on the left here, you're actually going to receive, it should be uploaded in the meeting notice already under the shared documents, but if not, it should be on the Career and Alumni Services website. I'll also make sure it is in that follow-up email I'm going to send you. Let me send over that Career Services link in the chat, and you can browse if you want to. Services website. All right, so if you are on that website under the Career Resources button, you will find some different options. Okie dokie, let's get this back up here. So on the left, this is one that I have created for you. It is ATS friendly, meaning it can be read. It has ample space for you to put in your information. It's very clean and clearly organized very well. All three of these actually are very well organized. But consistency is key here. So with those other examples that we saw in the previous slides, color-wise, right, they are consistent, but this is all jumbled, right? It's all over the place. It's kind of distracting for the eye, and we only have 7 to 8 seconds, right? So we want to make sure we make a good impression with that document right off the bat. So this middle one, again, consistency, clean formatting, clean fonts. The employer could go to where they're looking for and pick up things very easily. This last one has a little bit more text, but it's not overwhelming. It still gives enough even balance between the text and the white space. Section headers are clearly defined. So if you're on Google and you're looking for templates out there on the web, try to stick with something that you see here. If you're leaning more towards a CV template, there are good ones out there. I do have one on the website that you can use. But again, black and white, stick with something that looks similar to this. Good formatting, easy for you to edit. And section headers also are consistent throughout. The key here would be showing you those examples is that I want you to start off on the right track. It is okay to use a template out there if it matches what we've looked at. Google Docs and Microsoft Word can be a little tricky. So if you're looking for something or you find a PDF document online, something you can't edit, start with a blank Word document or a blank Google Doc and try to mimic that formatting on your own. There's also the USU approved samples, the ones we've created. You can easily download those, edit in either Google Docs or Microsoft Word, whatever you feel comfortable with. But as you work through this, I really want you to remember that 7 to 8 second scan. What is my most important experience that I want to push across to the employer above all else? I do have a fun little resume writing guide in here that you can download and check out. I will put this link in the chat for you too. And so it has lots of tips. It has some other samples in there. If you go through the couple pages, there is a nursing specific section that gives you some further tips as well. But we're going to talk about some of that today. The big difference between resumes and CVs are a few different things. So resumes are a more like condensed version of all of your experience. It does include educational work-related experiences, but that CV has so much more. It's much more of like a summary of your work experience over the past 10 plus years. You can have a lot more in your CV as well. I would recommend for someone in the nursing field that's been here for a while, I would lean maybe towards a CV or have some type of resume CV hybrid. So some positions for a resume might be in business, nonprofit, more technical, non-academic fields, where a CV is more faculty research, clinical based, because you have a lot more to offer, a lot more experience to showcase. A length for a resume is usually 1 to 2 pages max. Anything more than that, we really should be transitioning over to a CV. My rule of thumb here is every 7 to 10 years of experience per 1 page. So if you have more than 7 to 10 years of experience, bump it onto the next page because I know you have a lot of experience to showcase and you're going to be finding that you're going to be running out of room. A resume focuses on a very specific set of qualifications for a position. Where a CV, you could use it for a ton of different things. If you're applying for a teaching position and a clinical experience position, you can use the same document for both. Where a resume, you might focus on tailoring it for one specific job. That doesn't mean that we're not going to tailor our CV. It just means we have a lot more information to cover, and maybe we're only tweaking a couple things, where a resume, we're probably going to rework the entire thing. So I know the CV versus resume gets a little bit confusing. So though I wanted to lay out the differences for you so that you know what they are and can choose the option that's best for you. In terms of appearance and style, they both look very similar. So this applies to both options. There are templates, right? We did talk about the good ones, the bad ones. Pick the one that looks similar to what we see on our screen here. If you're starting out fresh, I do recommend starting with that blank document, trying to mimic the formatting or the style. One thing that might help you is your line spacing. So if I were to put my cursor and go to the end of this education and credentials line and click the enter button on my keyboard, when it goes to the next line, it will eliminate the space in between if you set that line spacing to 0. This way we can maximize that document. We can get as much information on there as we possibly can without having some weird gaps in spacing. Same thing with your margins. Your margins are the space on the outside of your document. So you can play around with that if you're working and you're typing through and you're finding that you're kind of pushing onto that second page. Try to play around with your margins a little bit to see if that helps condense things on the same page. We want to make sure we're choosing good, appropriate fonts that anybody can read. So what I mean by that is that if you had a computer and so had a computer in a different location that's different than yours, they have a very different computer system than you. If they were to open your document, they have that font on their computer. So I say stick with anything in the sans serif family. So anything with SANS in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, Arial, Cambria, Calibri, Georgia, Tahoma, or Times New Roman all qualify are in the sans serif, meaning any computer in the world would have these fonts on them. I know we all want to be unique and stand out and have some fun things on there to be memorable, but I promise you, if you stick with the basic fonts, it still will get through the ATS. Font sizing, 10 to 12, and then your name should be the biggest thing on that page, right? That is you. So I always say 14 to 16 is pretty good. It really shouldn't be any bigger than that because it might look a little funny. So 10 to 12 for the rest of your document, and then your name should be a little bit bigger. But you want to make sure we remain consistent. So everything has the same font, everything has the same formatting. What you can change is some different things stylistically. So in terms of your section headers, you can play around with doing caps. You can put a line underneath. You can maybe center align them, bold, italics, some different types there. We just want to make sure that each section would have the same formatting. So that way my eye is drawn here. I know that my education and credentials are at the top. Then we go to clinical experience. So if I was an employer and I was trying to hire someone, or if I was a student here at USU and I was looking for clinical opportunities and using this document, these are things we would want to showcase, right? We would want to showcase our previous clinical experience and our experience right there, bolded right in front of the employer's face. Some things not to include. We already talked about photos and why those are bad. but also any personal information. We wouldn't be putting our social security number out online, right? So we're not going to put personal information on our resume. That includes your birthday, ID number, citizenship status, work authorization as well. Now, in different countries outside of the US, this is very different. So make sure you understand that based on where you're applying. If you're applying for jobs in the US, which I assume most of you are, make sure you kind of modernize or transition your document to a United States modern resume. If you're someone who might be exploring international opportunities, you can definitely touch base with me. We can talk about some different options for international spaces. But for the US, we want to stick with something like this. No personal information on there. Headers and footers. So these would be texts that are in the top or the bottom of your document. I always say stay away from those other than a page number. A page number is fine. Your ATS might kick back on that. It just depends on what's there and what you're working with. And then personal pronouns, which include I, me, or my, we want to keep those off of our resume. Sometimes when we use those, it can show opinion rather than factual information. And so it might kick back in the ATS, or it might get a weird score. So stick to more of like a factual based structure when you're writing your bullet points and talking about your experiences. And I'll show you how to formulate those in just a bit. We've been talking lots about this ATS system and those keywords, right? Those buzzwords for your field. This is an example of a nurse practitioner position. And as you can see, I went through and highlighted some keywords or things that stuck out to me that I feel like might be important for the job. So for example, we have teamwork skills, cultural competency, doing exams, patient observation, running tests, administering medication. Let's see, proficiency with medical instruments, right? I didn't highlight this, but like board certification in ANCC or AANP. We have our HIPAA, OSHA certifications. Those types of things are really good keywords to kind of point out. So when you're reading through it, you don't need to print it out and highlight it, but just have an idea, or maybe have it pulled up on another screen or do a side-by-side with your resume so that you can double check and go to the job description, go back to your resume. Do I mention this somewhere? Do I mention this? These can both be those hard or soft skills. So hard skills would be like those technical based skills. For a nursing career, those would be things like diagnostic tests, right? Patient observations, administering medication. Your soft skills, I like to call them your people skills. Those would be like teamwork or communicating with patients. Written and verbal communication skills, those would be classified as soft skills. They're both very important for the keyword checks. So making sure you go through, look at those. You should do this for each application. I know it can be a little time, it takes a lot to do it, but once you get going, and especially if you're in the nursing field, majority of those job descriptions are going to sound very similar. So it might be only one or two things that you're going to be changing or plugging into your resume. So now we're moving into our bullet points. I do have kind of a secret formula here that you get to have the recipe to for making strong bullet points. I really like to think about bullet points as I statements, but the I is invisible. So when we want to start out with a strong action verb, we wouldn't say I responsible for. That doesn't make sense, right? But what we would say is I supported or I supervised. So think of them as I statements, but that I kind of falls away. Think about what you did in the tasks that you completed. I know we say like reviewing or charting patients, right? But really think about how you did that or why you did that. How often did you do it? Ask yourself those questions because those details matter. You can also get a feel by reading that job description, seeing how they format it in the job description, and take inspiration from that. And then the last piece here, which is the most important, is what was the outcome? What happened? What was the result? Did you accomplish a goal, right? And then if we can, maybe adding some quantifiable results here. So I have a couple examples to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So this first one, we have our strong action verb, right? So I compiled data, right? Our action verb is compiled. And then what we did is the same thing. So you compiled data. What you were doing or why you were doing it was to construct a prevention program, and you're reviewing the prevalence of obesity in San Diego County. So we provided a little bit more detail on why we were doing it, how we were doing it, what we were doing. Next one here, so right, developed individual care plans based on assessments to achieve optimal outcomes post-surgery. So we have our what we did, we have our why we did it, we're good to go. I'm going to skip down here to the last one because it has the quantifiable result in here. So our I statement would be I provided. That is our action verb. Leadership, coaching, and development are our skills we plugged from our job description. But we were still using the skills. It just helped remind us. Our quantifiable result is this number 8. So we are providing coaching and leadership development for 8 direct reports. Why we were doing it is to maintain engagement and productivity. So once you get going and you're kind of familiarizing yourself with this process, it does get a little bit easier over time. It can take time too to shift your brain and your thinking, because usually we would just write all these little bullet points of all the tasks that we did. But when we sit and actually are reflective of the process and why we did this and what exactly the process looked like, were there tools that we used? Did we collaborate with other people on this project or this task? We really can add a little bit more detail there to give the employer some more info. Now let's talk about how we can add our Sigma experience there. So questions here that you can ask yourself. What do I do as a member or a leader? Now this can be in Sigma, but it can also be outside. So think of your volunteer experience. Maybe you are a part of any organizations locally in your community. These can all apply here. What skills am I developing? So communication, teamwork, public speaking, organization skills, leadership. These are our soft skills we talked about, or our people skills. Then we have, what was the purpose or impact of my involvement? So what impact am I making with my involvement? What purpose am I serving by being here? So some examples, I didn't want to give you the full bullet points because I want you to practice on your own, but just giving you some inspiration here. So maybe you worked on a project or an initiative where you collaborated with other Sigma members. You attend your chapter meetings focused on XYZ. You developed and presented on materials. Maybe you went to a conference, participated in various service projects, and engaged in professional development. You all watching this or attending today can definitely do this last one, right? Because you're attending this session today on resume writing. So engaging in professional development opportunities through virtual workshops. There you go. I just gave you your bullet point. So asking yourself these questions and really reflecting on your experience is going to be essential to help you build these bullet points. You can also have a little handy dandy sidekick using AI tools. So I wanted to throw this in here because I know it's a hot topic. The important thing with using AI is to make sure we're following USU's AI policy, but also that we're being safe for our own privacy and security. Okay, so when we're using these tools, we want to just use our critical thinking skills and put those hard hats on when we're using these tools. So recommendations here are, if you wanted to use AI to help you enhance your existing bullet points, you could use something like this prompt here. So please help me strengthen my bullet points for my resume. Here are my current bullet points for my nurse practitioner resume. Now you're going to go to your resume and you can highlight just the bullet points, no personal information in AI, no contact information. Don't highlight your entire resume and paste it in there. Just maybe the 1 or 2 bullet points you want help with. You can provide it a little bit more context and ask it to expand using the different bullet point formula criteria I gave you. And you'll see that AI will really help you enhance that a little bit further. If you want it to help you create bullet points for Sigma experience, you could ask it to help me develop 2 to 3 bullet points showcasing my Sigma Honor Society experience. Here are some activities I did to help you. So then you would just type out a couple items that you did or participated in. It will help create those bullet points. I do have an example of one that I did previously that I want to show you. So you can see here, I asked it to help me grow my bullet points for my resume. Here are my current bullet points for my nurse practitioner resume. So my bullet points were very purposefully very short because I wanted to see what it could do. But you can see I said saw patients, charting, placed orders, coordinated with MDs on patient care. Now, as an employer, if I were to read this in a candidate pool, I'm not even going to entertain this because I want to see more here. You can see ChatGPT did a wonderful job of really expanding those. The key here, though, is that we're not just going to copy and paste this into our resume. That means we're not using our brain. What we can do is read this and ask ourselves, does this make sense? Did we actually do this? Was this the goal? Was this the outcome we were trying to obtain? Were there other things? Did ChatGPT miss some items? So make sure that we double check this. Does this actually make sense? And also adding your own little flair in there. Does this actually sound like me? Asking that question is going to be really important too, because ChatGPT has a habit of sounding very robotic because let's be honest, AI is essentially a robot. So we want to take a look at that and make sure it makes sense. But if you are in a pinch and you need some help with resume bullets, you can always kind of lean on AI. You don't have to use ChatGPT. You can use any of the generative AI platforms, including Gemini, Claude. There's so many out there now, Copilot. So you can kind of use your resources and pick which one makes sense for you. So I'm going to pause here. Do we have any questions? I know I've been talking a lot.
I don't have any questions, but I'm like already thinking of things that I want to update on my own CV, especially with all this information about the applicant tracking system.
Yeah.
That is so helpful to know.
You don't know what you don't know, but
Exactly.
unfortunately, I have a love-hate relationship with the applicant tracking system. I think it is providing employers a really great service because especially now we're in a world where folks are just mass applying to hundreds and hundreds of applications, and it is not possible for employers to review all of them, right? And so if we as a job seeker know how to get through to the employer, we're going to be much more successful in the process. All right, what do we got here? Does USU or Sigma offer a resume CV review of our current documents? Yes, good question, Mark. Yes, we do. Those services are free. And I will give you my contact info for you to reach out and we can chat and connect. Good question. Anything else? All right, if you do, feel free to drop them in the chat, or if you're watching the recording, you can always email me and we can follow up. So now we're going to get into what should your resume look like. So we had the good templates that we went through earlier, but I want to actually break down each section. So some tips here for education section, you want to make sure you include your education or institution name, who provided you with this degree or certificate, whatever the program was. We want to have a clean section header. Make it make sense for what's in this section. So if you're including your license information, then maybe we want to list it as education and licenses or education and training. So use very specific language here. Short form and long form of our degree. So this is one that I was actually watching a webinar recently that it pointed out this within an ATS. So if we did not list Master of Science in Nursing and just left it as MSN, concentration in FNP, the ATS might not give you a higher score, meaning it might not pick up that MSN stands for Master of Science in Nursing based on what the employer put into the qualifications of the job. So I always say put the long form and the short form of your degree name, meaning put your long name of the degree and in parentheses that short form. So if you had your RN license, right, registered nurse, but in parentheses we'll put RN. Some employers might only put RN in the system, right? And in that case, you have both, you check both boxes, you're good to go. But that's one that I recently saw was stumping a lot of ATS and a lot of candidates weren't getting through because they didn't meet the education requirements. If you do have a concentration, you should put that there. So maybe maybe you got an associate's degree and you had a minor or you had a concentration in something previously. You can list that there. Your GPA, if you don't know your GPA, you can contact your academic advisor and they should be able to provide you with that, or you can check in the student portal. But I always say anything more than a 3.0, leave it on there. Anything less than that, I don't want it to hurt you. Sometimes they might put a GPA qualification in there. If it's a clinical site, they might want only candidates with a certain GPA. So that's where it would be essential for you to put it in. And then including your completion and expected dates. So this is one where I see a lot of students leave off. They don't put in their expected graduation date. This is important because the employer wants to know when they can hire you and you can start working. So making sure you put that date in there will be very important. And then if you choose to put your licenses and certifications in there, you can include your license number, your state specific information, DEA license in this example, right? So you can include that information here. Some applications will just have you enter that in the system manually, but if it doesn't, you can always list it in your resume or CV. Moving on to our experience section. This is going to look different based on who you are. So the different experiences that you've had, the different clinicals, projects, really just depends on your background and your preferences and what you want to include. But the basics here are details, details, details. So making sure that whatever we include in there, we want to try to put a bullet point or two. I will say try to describe them as much as you can. So if it was a project, or let's say you're in MSN 600 working on your capstone, you could include that on here somewhere in presentations and publications, some type of section here. But you can include a bullet point explaining what your capstone is about. That would be a really great example. You can highlight key items, skills. This is another place that's great for pulling those keywords from the job description and kind of plucking them in here as you can. You probably already have some bullet points written somewhere. So taking a look at the job description, what can we kind of use that's in the job description and put into our already existing content? And then keeping it consistent is essential here too. So in terms of our headers, in terms of the content, the different formatting we use, making sure everything looks clean, nice, makes sense. At the very top of our resume or CV, I always recommend, especially in the healthcare field, to have some type of summary or highlights section. It could look a little bit different based on your preference, but I wanted to provide you two different examples that I've seen. So the first one is more of a paragraph style. It's just a couple sentences highlighting your background and then 3 key items here. So you're kind of branding yourself as, in this case, Taylor Brown, nurse practitioner, mentor, healthcare advocate. So the employer could look at this and say, cool, I know Taylor is a nurse practitioner. They'd be a great leader because they have mentor experience. And right, they work in healthcare as an advocate, so they're excellent with patients. I just got that. I inferred that from those 3 items here. If I read on, right, you get more info. So that's that 7 to 8 seconds. You can put enough information in here for that employer to say, yes, I want to interview Taylor Brown. Similarly, instead of a paragraph, this just used bullet points. So instead of calling it a summary or having a paragraph here, you can call it career highlights and then have a couple bullet points. Same type of feel here. 7 to 8 seconds. What do we want them to know about us without reading the rest of our document? So in this case, we highlight our years of experience. We have that mentorship and coaching. But in this case, this was more of a faculty related role. So in terms of designing curriculum, evaluating students, clinical competency. So in that case, this might be a good option for someone going into higher education. They want to teach. I could just read these 3 things and say, okay, cool, I want to interview Taylor Brown for this position. So really think about, what do you want to highlight the most in those little short sentences or bullet points that if they didn't read anything else in that document, what do you want them to know most? We don't want to copy what's on our cover letter though. So today we're not talking about cover letters, but I do have resources on the website for those. So if you're interested, definitely check them out. A cover letter or your personal statement, it's called a couple different things, but really that's more of a letter where you can provide more detail to the employer. We don't want to copy what's already there. We want to try to use some unique stuff. So adding your Sigma experience, you have a couple options. And again, this just depends on what you want to do. First option I wanted to highlight is actually throwing it into your education section. So as an example, it would look something like this italicized content right here. So maybe you're a member, but maybe you haven't been involved in chapter events or any leadership positions. You can just list that you are a member by putting the Sigma. You're going to put your own chapter name there. This is just an example. And then you'll have Honor Society of Nursing and your induction date. So you could list it under your USU experience or your education. Option 2 is putting it in an experience section. So if you have a leadership experience, a professional development experience section, anything related to that, you could include it here. This is great if you've had a leadership position, you've participated in events. If you're listening to this, this would make sense for you. And then service projects, you're involved with other projects too. If you've presented or attended a conference or webinars, this is also a great opportunity. So you're going to still list the name and the Honor Society, your induction date, but instead you're going to actually have it as a standalone experience with bullet points. So these are really great options. Couple different ideas here, up to you on where you want to put it in. If you're kind of finding that you're running out of room, or if you add it in and it's pushing you onto another page, maybe condense it and pop it up in the education section. So going to take a second here. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I want to walk you through the Career and Alumni Services website. So if you're on the main USU website here, so usuniversity.edu, and you go under the Students tab, let me bump this up a little bit. Under the Students tab, I am the second option, so Career and Alumni Services. If you click on that, it will open up our web page here. And if you scroll down, this includes all of our upcoming events that you can register for right on the website. If we go to Career Resources, this is where you'll find all of the relevant career resources, including appointments and the link to book one of those, career assessments, guidelines for attire in the workplace, information on 1220, which is our career management system, interviewing, job search, networking, and LinkedIn. And then if you go down here, this is where you'll find resume, CV, and cover letter writing resources. So there's a lot of them. So pick the one that makes sense for you. But there's that resume writing guide I shared earlier, the different resume samples. There's a nursing and health sciences one, but there's also an FNP. There's also the DNP CV resume guide and DNP CV sample. Even if you're not in the DNP program, you can still use the CV template if you're wanting to lean more towards the CV. There also is a generalized one here too. And then just like I had examples for resumes, I have examples for cover letters. So if you've never written a cover letter before, you can check out this resource on how to write a cover letter for all jobs. And there's also a sample here. And so Mark asked earlier about having your documents reviewed. The link to have that appointment with me is also right here on the website. And you can book it. I'm available Monday through Friday. If the times listed don't work for you, just shoot me an email and we can coordinate something that works for your schedule. I have information on salary and negotiation, and then our JCPenney suit up sale, which is where you can get discounted professional attire. And then at the top here, I have information about professional headshots. So our partnership with JCPenney, you can get discounted headshots through them. There's a ton of other different resources on here, but I wanted to highlight those career resources since we're talking about resumes and cover letters. So I'm going to shoot back over here and we will wrap things up. I think at the end of the day, you likely already have a resume to start with. So now you're just enhancing it and making it even better. And including your Sigma experience is going to be a great start at that process. Use that resume writing bullet formula we talked about. Use AI if you're interested or you need extra help with that brainstorming. But feel free to contact me if you have questions, you want to work together. I'm more than happy to meet with you whenever you would like. So I'm going to drop another link in the chat. It's just a quick feedback form. This is definitely helpful for us as we continue to provide more workshops for you, but I also like to know if there's specific topics that you're interested in learning about. I can see if I can add them to the rotation for the future. So I will pop that in the chat and feel free to fill that out. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out with me for the last 51 minutes. If you do have questions, I'll hang around for a few minutes, but otherwise, if you're watching the replay, shoot me an email or schedule an appointment, and I look forward to meeting with you soon.
Thank you so much, Logan.
Of course.